Well, good morning. I'm Brent Adams here with your Rural Strong Morning Ag Report for this Friday, October 27th, the 300th day of 2023. Leading off the headlines this morning, Iowa Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst are calling on the Department of Commerce to lower the countervailing duties on phosphate fertilizers from Morocco. The push comes from the Court of International Trade's recent remand of DOC's subsidy calculation. We ask that Commerce carefully consider and follow the court's decision in Commerce's recalculation of the subsidy amount, both in its final determination in the investigation and its administrative review, the Iowa delegation said in a letter. Reducing the subsidy rate would provide welcome relief for U.S. farm suppliers and their customers, who are America's family farmers. Grassley and his colleagues cited promising preliminary findings from the DOC on potentially reducing the subsidy rate by about 5.5%. Since the Biden administration boosted duties on Moroccan phosphate fertilizers, their supply across the U.S. has dropped, placing an undue financial burden on farmers. The move drove already high input costs up even further. Well, a recent report from Rabobank says the outlook for the global fertilizer markets is positive in the coming years. However, there are some challenges and potential risks to monitor. The global fertilizer market is recovering, with an estimated increase in usage of around 3% this year, after a 7% drop in 2022 because of significant market complications. The Rabobank Affordability Index shows a positive outlook for fertilizer purchasing in 2024, with an expected increase of almost 5% next year. The Farm Input Division at Rabobank says nitrogen growth grew to 2% this year, phosphate 3.9%, and potash was up 5%. There is a potential impact from the Israel-Hamas war, as Israel is a sizable supplier of phosphate and potash. Israel accounts for about 3% of the world's phosphate exports and 8% of the global potash supply. Currently, there is sufficient availability and alternative supply sources. Well, the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, stressed in his acceptance speech the GOP's long-standing push to rein in spending, a goal that has direct implications for ag spending. Johnson hails from the GOP's hardline conservatives, some of whom torpedoed the fiscal year 2024 USDA-FDA spending bill last month. Johnson voted for the bill that would have cut $8 billion by reprogramming unspent COVID funds, not enough for many hardliners. But the new speaker said this after taking the gavel.
The skyrocketing cost of living is unsustainable, and Americans should not have to worry about how they're going to feed their family every week because they can't afford their groceries anymore. We have to bring relief to the American people by reining in federal spending and bringing down inflation.
Johnson argued the greatest threat to national security is the debt, forcing up borrowing costs for farmers, homeowners, and others.
The debt has crossed almost $33.6 trillion. In the time that it's going to take me to deliver this speech, we'll go up another $20 million in debt. It's unsustainable.
The new speaker said fixing it won't be easy.
Tough decisions will have to be made. But the consequences, if we don't act now, are unbearable. We have a duty to the American people to explain this to them so they understand it well. And we are going to establish a bipartisan debt commission to begin working on this crisis immediately.
Treasury says interest payments on the national debt doubled in 1 year to $659 billion, just behind defense spending and on target to consume almost 30% of the federal revenue by 2030. Commodity group leaders complained about the cost of borrowing at an ag hearing in May, including one who said his loan cost had tripled in just a few years. Well, what will be the predominant weather pattern for our country this winter, per the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's outlook? Here with the details is USDA Radio's Rod Bain.
What is the outlook for our nation's weather conditions for the winter of 2023-24? USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's forecast for winter weather indicates that
the big story for the United States for the winter of 2023-24 is that we are looking at El Nino being in place for the first time in 5 years.
What that means for practical weather for the U.S. in the winter months is
typically during El Nino, we see a weakening of the northern jet stream, the polar jet stream, and a strengthening of the southern or subtropical jet stream.
So temperatures should be mild and warm for most of the country, particularly along the northern tier. Meanwhile, precipitation should be more predominant in the southern half of the U.S. during the upcoming winter months. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And finally, this morning, if you or your kids go trick-or-treating, you're participating in a tradition that has evolved over many centuries. Here to fill us in is USDA Radio's Gary Crawford.
It's nighttime in late October, and suddenly you hear... Slowly you open the front door, and then you see them, the ghosts, the monsters!
Oh, it's just the trick-or-treaters. But how did that idea get started? Agriculture Department historian Ann Efland says it may go back to a 9th century European practice on All Hallows Eve called souling,
in which people would travel that night and beg for soul cakes, which were a square bread with currants. And in return, they would promise to pray for people's dead relatives to help them get to heaven.
And this was coupled with another tradition,
Leaving treats out on the doorstep for the fairies who might be playing tricks, and also, in some cases, leaving supper out for the dead who were wandering.
Add to this the later tradition of Mischief Night, on which minor pranks were played on people, and you get the origins of our modern trick-or-treat.
And these days, more than ever, parents need to make sure their little trick-or-treaters have a happy, safe Halloween.
We're almost to that special spooky night.
Trick or treat, give me something good to eat.
And in some places, kids are still going door-to-door trick-or-treating, which is fine if we parents work on keeping kids safe. University of Kentucky Extension Child Development Specialist Dr. David Weisenhorn says, first off,
children under the age of 12 should certainly be accompanied by an adult. If they're 10 or 11, maybe they walk to the door by themselves from the sidewalk. But younger children should certainly be accompanied the whole way, so they're not alone.
and those kids need to be able to be seen, especially by motorists.
Maybe that's as simple as putting a small flashing light to either clip onto the costume or being able to add easy reflective strips to the costume.
And make sure masks don't restrict your kids' vision. And when the kids get back home,
Dump out all the candy and give it a good once-over. Are all of the candies individually wrapped and has that seal or wrapper been broken in any way?
if so, throw it out just in case. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Well, you can keep up with the latest in the world of agriculture by subscribing to the Tractors and Troubadours podcast from Rural Strong Media. Each week, I bring you agriculture industry newsmakers, hot button industry issues, educational features, and the best in traditional country music. The Tractors and Troubadours podcast can be found at ruralstrongmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We also invite you to join us daily on Rural Strong Radio, our 24/7 streaming radio station, found at ruralstrongmedia.com or on the Live 365 streaming radio app for your mobile device. Each day, we bring you our award-winning agriculture programming, as well as the best in traditional country music, mixed in with a little bluegrass, western swing, southern rock, and inspirational music. Again, the place to find Rural Strong Radio is ruralstrongmedia.com or the Live 365 streaming radio app. We're portable, so take us with you everywhere you go this harvest season. We'll get you through those long, challenging days this fall. Well, I'll be back again next week with another Rural Strong Morning Ag Report here on Steve Shetler Media. Make it a great weekend, everybody.